I had just moved into a small, modern studio apartment on the 8th floor. Sunlight poured through the wide windows, the faint hum of traffic floated from below, and the quiet made the apartment feel safe. Almost too safe. Everything felt perfect. A fresh start after months of chaos. I spent the first night unpacking boxes and arranging furniture. That's when I noticed the full-length mirror in the hallway. It seemed ordinary at first, but something about it made me pause. My reflection blinked a second later than I had. I laughed nervously, blaming fatigue and the stress of moving. The next few nights, subtle things began to unsettle me. My reflection would sometimes linger when I stepped away, or tilt its head in ways I hadn't moved. Occasionally, I caught it smiling when I wasn't. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was my imagination, but a pit of unease began forming in my stomach. Every evening, I felt watched. Even turning my back to the mirror didn't help. Something about it was alive, aware, patient. I began sleeping on the couch, flashlight in hand, scanning the hallway in case whatever it was decided to show itself. Late one night, I heard soft tapping from the mirror. A faint, rhythmic sound that made my skin crawl. I froze, heart pounding, every muscle tense. Summoning courage, I approached the hallway mirror. At first, nothing moved. Then, slowly, my reflection stepped forward on its own, movements jerky and unnatural, like a marionette. I stumbled backward, tripping over a box, my flashlight shaking in my hands. Sweat dripped down my temples. I wanted to scream, but my voice failed me. The reflection stayed, staring, unmoving, until it raised its hand, mirroring mine, pale and cold. It waved. I couldn't sleep that night. Hours passed as I sat on the couch, flashlight scanning every corner. The reflection didn't leave. I realized the mirror wasn't just reflecting me. It was watching, waiting, and aware. By morning, my anxiety had only grown. Objects near the mirror had subtly shifted, a chair angled slightly, a box knocked over. Was it moving them? Or was I losing my mind? I had no answers, only the growing certainty that this apartment wasn't as safe as it seemed.
Over the next few days, the phenomena escalated. The mirror's reflection no longer synchronized with me. Sometimes it lingered, sometimes it smiled when I didn't. Scratches appeared on the hardwood floor where none had been before. Even doors I had closed creaked open in the middle of the night. I documented everything, recording the sounds, but the camera captured nothing unusual. Still, I could feel it. The apartment had become a predator, and I was the prey. One night, I woke to a faint whisper, "Come closer." My heart thumped. The reflection smiled at me, eyes glinting unnaturally. I froze, couldn't move, couldn't breathe. It felt alive, patient, and it knew I could see it. I tried reasoning with myself, thinking I was imagining things. But each night, the mirror became more aggressive in subtle ways. A shadow here, a flicker there, until fear became a constant companion. By the end of the week, I couldn't take it anymore. The mirror's reflection had begun moving independently. Gestures I didn't make, expressions I hadn't formed. Objects shifted subtly near it. Scratches deepened on the floor, doors creaked open. My anxiety turned into terror. I tried inviting a friend to witness it, but they saw nothing, just a normal mirror in a quiet apartment. "You're stressed," they said. I wanted to believe them. I wanted to laugh. But deep down, I knew this wasn't in my head. One night, I awoke to the softest whisper again. "Look at me." My pulse thundered. The reflection grinned impossibly wide. My hand rose on its own, trembling, and the reflection mirrored it perfectly. I bolted to the door, fleeing the apartment in darkness, flashlight dropping to the floor, my mind racing with disbelief and dread. I haven't returned to the apartment since. I left everything behind, my belongings abandoned. But even now I see it. In shop windows, in car windshields, even on my phone screen. The reflection that isn't mine. Waiting. Patient. Smiling. I don't know what it wants, or if it's bound to that apartment. All I know is that mirrors are no longer safe. I avoid them, but some glimpses are unavoidable. Every time I see a reflection, my chest tightens, my stomach twists, and I feel its cold awareness behind the glass. Even now I can almost hear the faint tapping, the whisper, the movement just beyond the reflection. It's patient, and it knows I can see it. And I know it's waiting for me to look again. They moved in on a quiet Sunday evening. The apartment smelled of dust, metal, and a faint trace of old perfume. It wasn't perfect. The floorboards creaked, the ceiling light buzzed, but it was finally theirs. After months of searching, this small place felt like peace. By nightfall, only a few boxes were left to unpack. That's when they noticed it. The mirror. Tall, full length, leaning against the hallway wall. It wasn't theirs. Probably left by whoever lived here before. The glass was clean, its surface catching the dim glow from the streetlight outside. When they walked past, something about the reflection felt off. The light in the mirror seemed slower, softer, as if lagging by a fraction of a second. They blinked, staring. It looked normal again. They laughed quietly to themselves and went to bed. The hum of the fridge was the only sound in the apartment. But just as they began to drift off, there was a creak in the hallway, sharp, deliberate, like the sound of someone stepping forward and stopping. Their eyes opened, staring into the dark. The mirror's outline was barely visible from bed, catching the faintest silver glow. And for a moment, they thought they saw something move within it, something shifting just behind their reflection. Then it was gone. They sat up, heart pounding. The apartment was silent again. It was just the house settling, they told themselves. Just the sound of a new place learning their presence. They lay back down and closed their eyes. The mirror watched quietly from the hall. Morning light crept through thin curtains, washing the apartment in a dull gray. They woke up later than usual, disoriented, their head heavy with strange dreams they couldn't quite remember. The mirror caught their eye again as they walked past it toward the kitchen. It stood there silently, reflecting the hallway and part of the living room. It looked normal, harmless. They made coffee and sat near the window, listening to the city below. Yet their attention kept drifting back to that mirror. Something about its angle, its placement, bothered them. It wasn't centered on the wall. It leaned just slightly forward, as if pulled by some invisible weight. They decided to move it later, maybe to the bedroom, but when they tried lifting it that afternoon, it didn't budge. The thing was heavier than it looked, impossibly so. They checked behind it. Nothing unusual, no bolts, no hooks, just a wall of cracked paint and silence. That night, as they brushed their teeth, they noticed it again. Their reflection blinked a second after they did. They froze, toothpaste foaming in their mouth, staring. For a full minute they didn't move. Then, in a rush of courage or denial, they stepped closer. The reflection did too. Every detail matched perfectly, except for the eyes. Theirs were tired and red from the day. The reflections were wide, alert, and watching. They turned away quickly and went to bed without looking back. In the hallway, the mirror seemed to hum faintly, almost like it was breathing. The following day felt heavier, like the air itself had thickened overnight. They avoided the hallway as much as possible, moving from room to room with purpose, keeping busy, music playing, windows open, every light on. But the mirror still found them. Its reflection reached into every corner of their vision, appearing in glimpses, catching their movement even when they tried not to look. In the afternoon, while sorting through old photos, they accidentally dropped one. As they bent to pick it up, They froze. In the reflection, someone was standing behind them, tall, still, unrecognizable. Their breath caught, heart hammering. They turned fast, but the hallway was empty. The silence that followed was sharp, hollow. They tried to laugh it off, but the sound came out shaky. Maybe it was a trick of the light, a flash from outside. But deep down, something inside them knew better. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Every creak, every hum, every whisper of wind scraped against their nerves. Sometime after midnight, they woke to a faint tapping sound. It came from the hallway, from the mirror. Each tap was slow, measured, like a finger on glass. They held their breath, listening. The tapping stopped. Then came a single knock, clear, deliberate. They didn't move for a long time. When morning finally came, the mirror stood still, untouched. But faint fingerprints, long and thin, marked the inside of the glass. By the fourth night, they could no longer pretend nothing was wrong. The air in the apartment felt colder now, heavier, like the space itself was rejecting them. They tried covering the mirror with a blanket, but it didn't stay. By morning, the fabric had fallen neatly to the floor, folded as if placed by careful hands. They started noticing differences in their reflection. Small ones at first. Their clothes a shade darker, a strand of hair out of place, a blink delayed. But tonight it was unmistakable. The reflection smiled when they didn't. A slow, deliberate curl of the lips that didn't belong to them. Panic clawed at their chest. They stumbled back, knocking over a lamp. The room went dark. The only light came from the faint shimmer of the mirror. Inside, their reflection stood perfectly still, eyes unblinking. They called a friend, voice trembling, trying to explain. But as they spoke, the mirror behind them began to ripple like disturbed water. The voice on the other end asked if someone else was there, said they could hear whispering. The call disconnected. Silence. Then, from the mirror, a whisper answered their name. They backed away slowly, unable to look away. The reflection stepped closer, one pace at a time, until its hand pressed flat against the glass. And from the other side, the surface began to crack. They didn't sleep that night. Every sound felt amplified, the hum of the lights, the groan of the pipes, their own breathing. The mirror stood uncovered in the hallway, fractured in a web of thin cracks. Yet somehow, the reflection inside was untouched, whole, smiling faintly, as if waiting. They decided to leave. They packed fast, shoving clothes into a duffel bag, barely glancing up. But when they turned toward the front door, their reflection didn't move. It stood facing them, eyes wide and alive. The cracks in the glass deepened, spreading outward like veins. The lights flickered once, twice. Then the apartment fell into darkness. Their reflection lifted a hand and touched the inside of the glass. The air around them shifted, colder, electric. They backed away, tripping over a box. The reflection leaned forward, and then, with a sound like shattering ice, it stepped through. The world seemed to blink. Morning came. The apartment was quiet again. Sunlight filtered across the floor, catching on the edges of the broken mirror. Inside the glass, faintly visible, stood their figure, motionless, eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream. When the new tenants moved in weeks later, they found the same mirror still leaning against the hallway wall. It was spotless, clear, waiting. Mia moved in on a quiet Thursday morning. The hallway outside her door smelled faintly of fresh paint and damp wood. The walls were yellowed with age, lined with old picture hooks that held nothing anymore. Every few seconds, the ceiling light flickered, buzzing like an insect caught inside glass. The building wasn't new, and it wasn't welcoming. But the rent was low, and that was reason enough. Across from her apartment, right beside the elevator, stood a tall mirror. The frame was brass, darkened with green patches of tarnish. It looked old, maybe original to the building. Mia didn't like how it faced her door directly. Each time she unlocked it, her reflection waited, dim and distant in the poor light. She tried not to look, but she always did. That evening, after unpacking the last box, she caught something strange. As she walked past the mirror, her reflection didn't move right away. It lingered a second too long before following. She froze, heart thudding, then laughed quietly at herself. "You're overtired," she whispered. Later that night, she stepped out to throw away trash. The hallway was silent, except for the hum of the elevator machinery. But when she glanced at the mirror again, her reflection was gone. The glass showed only an empty hallway that stretched farther than it should, past the walls, fading into darkness. Mia couldn't stop thinking about the mirror. She told herself it was nothing, bad lighting, exhaustion, a trick of the eyes. But the image of that empty hallway wouldn't leave her mind. The next morning she stood in front of it again, coffee in hand, studying the surface closely. Her reflection was there this time, sleepy and hollow-eyed. She leaned forward, almost touching the glass. It was colder than she expected. For a brief second, she thought she saw her reflection smile. Not wide or exaggerated, just a faint, knowing curl of the mouth. She blinked hard, and it was gone. Her stomach turned. She laughed nervously, forcing herself to walk away. "It's all in your head," she said out loud. Her voice sounded too loud in the empty hall. The rest of the day passed in silence. By evening, she'd almost forgotten about it. She made dinner, washed dishes, and scrolled aimlessly through her phone until she dozed off on the couch. Around midnight, a noise pulled her awake, a soft thump, then another, coming from the hallway. When she stepped out, everything was still. The air was colder than before, dry and heavy. She looked toward the mirror. Her reflection was there, standing just as she was, except her reflection's hand was raised slightly, fingers spread. She looked down at her own hands. They were still at her sides. Her throat tightened. She didn't move, didn't breathe. By the third night, Mia could no longer ignore it. Every step down the hallway felt heavier, every sound sharper. The mirror seemed to linger in her vision even when she looked away, its presence pressing at the edge of her awareness. She kept the lights on, tried to stay busy, but each glance toward the reflection made her skin crawl. She was folding laundry when she noticed it again. Her reflection wasn't quite matching her movements. She bent to pick up a sock that had fallen. The reflection stayed upright, watching, unmoving for a split second longer than it should. That delay was enough. Her pulse spiked, hands trembling. She stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. The reflection's expression shifted, not in a natural way, but subtle. A smirk curled at the edge of its lips, almost imperceptible. Her stomach turned, and she stumbled back. That night, sleep was impossible. Every creak of the old building made her heart leap. She kept glancing at the mirror, even from her bedroom, half expecting to see movement where none should be. At midnight, she heard it, a soft tap, coming from the hallway. Tap, tap, tap. Not loud enough to carry through the apartment, but enough to make her freeze in place. She gripped the edge of her bed, staring at the door. When she finally summoned the courage to look at the mirror, the reflection was gone. Just the hallway stretching endlessly, darker than it had been before, the edges of the glass almost pulsing with shadow. Mia realized, with a sudden sinking dread, that she wasn't alone in that space, and whatever was there wasn't waiting to leave. By the fourth night, Mia was exhausted, tense, and on edge. Every sound in the apartment seemed amplified. The hum of the fridge, the creak of the pipes, the faint buzz of the overhead light. She avoided the hallway whenever possible, moving from room to room, trying to pretend the mirror didn't exist. But the feeling of being watched never left. She decided to cover the mirror with a sheet. When she returned hours later, it was folded neatly on the floor, as if someone had deliberately removed it. Her heart pounded, and her hands shook. Later, as she prepared for bed, She caught her reflection in a small, secondary mirror in the bathroom. At first it seemed normal, but then the eyes, hers, but not hers, stared back. They were wider, sharper, alert. The faintest hint of a smile tugged at the corner of its lips. Mia took a step back, fumbling for the door. The apartment felt colder now, heavier, like it was closing in. She tried to call a friend, but as she spoke, the mirror seemed to ripple, subtle at first, like water disturbed by wind. Her friend on the line paused, saying they could hear whispers in the background. The call ended abruptly. Silence. Then the sound returned, coming from the hallway mirror. A whisper, soft but clear, saying her name. Mia froze. The reflection raised a hand and pressed it flat against the glass. For the first time, she realized the mirror was no longer just glass. It was a boundary, and something on the other side was aware of her. Mia didn't sleep that night. Every sound felt magnified, the hum of the pipes, the creak of the floorboards, the faint rustle of her own breath. The hallway mirror stood silently, cracked at the edges but reflecting a perfect image of her apartment. Only it wasn't her. She tried to leave, grabbing her bag, moving fast through the apartment. The mirror seemed to stretch subtly, elongating the hallway in ways that made her chest tighten. She froze when she saw her reflection, not mirroring her movements. Its eyes were wider, sharper, fixed on her with a quiet patience that made her stomach knot. Suddenly it smiled, a slow, deliberate curl of the lips, and then it winked. Mia recoiled. The mirror's surface rippled like disturbed water. Before she could react, the reflection stepped forward, but instead of coming out, it stopped halfway, one foot still in the glass, stretching toward her. A hand emerged first, pale and cold, brushing against her arm. The touch was real, chilling her to the bone. Mia stumbled backward and screamed. When she looked again, the mirror was empty, her reflection gone. Yet in every reflective surface of the apartment, the kitchen faucet, the window, even the polished floorboards, she could see it. Watching, smiling, waiting. She didn't leave that night. She didn't leave the next. Somewhere deep down she knew the apartment had changed her, and the mirror had claimed a part of her, one that would always remain on the other side, silent, patient, eternal.